Hey there, welcome to the Compared to Who show. I'm Heather Creekmore, and I am so excited to be hosting for the first time ever a live podcast with my good friend Amy Carlson. You may have heard Amy on the show before. Amy is a dietitian, she's an eating disorder expert, and she is just a fabulous human being who loves the Lord and knows her Bible and she's really fun too. So I am excited you are here for it, and I'm also excited that we've got a virtual studio audience. I guess
I
that's what
think
you
that's
call
what
it, a
it is.
virtual studio audience of some lovely women who have agreed to be part of our conversation today and bring their questions and really just, be a part of responding live to the
So fun.
conversations that we have. So, Amy, our topic for today is January,
January.
right? Like in January,
Mhm.
okay, everything. I mean, the number of diet commercials, I don't even watch that much television, but in the little bit of TV that I watch, I have a feeling it's 50% of the ads
Yeah.
are about weight loss and, meeting your New Year's goal this year, that sort of thing. And then to make it trickier, we've got messages from the church that seem to be telling us the same thing, right? Like January, a lot of churches do a church wide fast, um, or maybe even encourage like a specific program like the Daniel fast written by Rick Warren a number of years ago. Uh, there's some messages from church that are even confusing these issues a bit. And where I would love to start today, Amy, this is territory that you and I have covered before in other podcast episodes. I think we need to hear it again and again to really believe it, especially because these other messages are telling us the same things over and over again,
Mhm.
and it's confusing. So let me start with this question. Amy, am I more righteous if I'm following a diet plan? You
She's
didn't think I
starting
was going to say it like
strong.
that, did you?
She's starting strong. Oh, she's like coming and swinging. No. Yeah, let's just start. Yeah, that actually, when I have January clients, when I get to see my beautiful precious clients in January, Um, I don't think a lot of them would ask me that question, but they're asking it in a lot of different ways. They're asking it in a lot of different ways. What they're feeling is a whole lot of shame, and it's coming in kind of a back door way that isn't quite as obvious as your question, which I appreciate you asked it that obvious because we can just cut to the chase, but they're feeling shame because everyone around them is taking care of their health and honoring God in doing that. And so I'm going to use that language, right? Just to see how kind of it can get veiled. Nothing wrong with taking care of our health. There's nothing wrong with honoring God. Those are Lord, thank you for those things. We want to do those things. But in context of what we're talking about here today and the diet culture, there is, I'm for good or for bad, not on social media, for good for me, I guess, for my brain space. But I sit with clients who are showing me over and over, right? Or I do get on Pinterest. I'm looking for travel stuff and recipes, right? And first of all, I didn't know how many problems I had until I'm on Pinterest. I'm like, I didn't know that part of me needed fixing. I didn't know. I didn't even know I had that part. I didn't know I had that part until I got on Pinterest. And so the feeling that we are doing it wrong, and then you put that in context with the church or church culture or my faith or my relationship with God, it could translate into exactly what you said. I'm maybe not as righteous. I don't think we think of it in terms of that language. I don't think that that's necessarily what we're journaling. I don't feel as righteous, but I think we feel a whole lot of shame. I think we feel a whole lot of shame. And then we feel this extra layer of shame if I'm wanting to get well and I'm walking away from my years of dieting or diet culture or recovering from an eating disorder, but I don't feel great in my body, either physically, like I have aches and pains, or I'm wanting to um, feel better with my aches and pains in my body, or I just don't feel good. So I feel good because I'm leaving the diet culture, but I don't feel great because I don't love my body. And we have this whole sort of tension that we carry, which is, I must be doing it wrong. I must be doing this wrong. Because if I was doing it right, I would feel great and love God and love people and love myself. And so I think we get stuck there. And January sort of puts the magnifying glass on that, puts a big old magnifying glass and makes us feel those feelings times 10.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way you just said that, because so I did an interview this morning. I told Amy earlier, I was on live radio in Nashville this morning talking about this topic. And one of the places that we kind of went, it was like a 45-minute segment. So, it's morning radio drive time. So a song plays and we're chatting a little bit and then we come back. But one of the conversations we had while the music was playing was this concept where the DJ's just like, I just don't know how I could be free with food, right? If I was free with food, then I would just eat pizza all day, every day. And kind of deeper than that was this, but I struggle, right? Like I want to do this right. I want to do this well. And kind of the place we came to was like, it really is only diet culture that makes us this promise of a struggle-free life, right? It's really diet culture that says, you're a before, guess what? I'll make you an after. And then, woo, your problems will all go away.
Yeah.
And so I think that is part of the tension, right? Like we don't want to feel messy or uncomfortable. We want to feel good. But then we lob on that whole practical, like, well, you will feel better if you're XYZ for your health, right? Like, how do you help clients like navigate that whole like feel better versus feel better? That makes sense.
Yeah. I have a sweet client that we use this language. I have used it with several, but we've talked about that the diet culture has hijacked health, right? It's hijacked the idea of health. So if I'm dieting, then I'm pursuing my health, and anything related to that, anything related to if and I'll just give you a really simple I want to give you a couple funny examples. And my sister-in-law would giggle if she was on here. She would like to be on here, but she wouldn't know how to do the tech piece. So she'd be like, wait, what are we doing? But when our kids were younger, she used to say, we'd take our kids to the park and she'd say, do you want me to get you Sonic, or are you trying to be good? Right? Do you want me to get you a Sonic, or you're trying to be good? And I would say, sister, do I want a Sonic? Let me see. No, but that doesn't mean I'm good or I'm trying to be good, right? Some days I do want a Sonic, some days I don't want a Sonic. Or if I'm eating an apple for a snack, I can't tell you how many times somebody would say to me, oh, that's a great dietitian snack, or right, rather than it just being an apple. I'm eating an apple with peanut butter. So the tension also is, and that was the struggle that you're talking about that DJ had, which is to say, well, if I'm not following a plan, if I'm not following somebody telling me what to do, I will centrifugal force takes me over here to do this other thing that everyone automatically does. Well, ironically, our bodies are actually pretty amazing the way they're made. Studies show with kids who are given sort of free range food and given a variety of food and all these different foods, and they're given, permission to eat, they gravitate towards a wide variety of food and stop when they're full. So our bodies actually don't. But when we mount it into this right, good, bad, and before, after, and so even in the questions or the dialogue with that DJ this morning, what she's saying is, I need the diet culture to help me be healthy. And that's just a lie. That's a lie. And what we have done, it's a lie from $1 billion industry. But it's also a lie that's going on kind of in our Christian subculture, for sure. I know I've talked about it on here before. I get a little pepped up. And that's why I'm glad to see faces today. I just kind of see some of this, kind of see some thumbs up on this, right? The diet culture kind of, right? And then the church gets a little like in there and they're doing their thing and they're like, hey, if you want to steward your body well, we're going to do this. If you want to steward the temple and you're going to honor the Lord. And it's like, whoa, it feels like mounting shame. What am I doing? Right. So now if I say yes to the son, I guess I'm not honoring the Lord with my body. It's like, wow, wait, oh, I'm dizzy. Now I'm dizzy. Is anybody dizzy? I'm dizzy, right?
Your dizzy emoji. Everyone can throw out there.
I'm dizzy. Yeah. So when the diet culture and the Christian diet culture hijack the idea of health, then anything related to that is diet culture. So if I'm not doing a diet, then I'll eat pizza until it's coming out my eyeballs is what, right? The DJ maybe said. So she didn't say that, but I just added that as a sort of
as a visual.
What she said as a visual. That's what you picture pizza coming out your eyeballs. Pizza, cheese pizza coming out your eyeballs.
Well, let's just poll the audience we have here.
Okay.
I mean, so how many of you on this call today have felt messages from church or from your church community or even like church culture at large? How many of you have felt messages that seem to tell you were holier or more righteous, or what other words would you add to that, Amy?
Stewarding well what God's given you, right?
Have these been messages you've heard in the church? Yeah, we're getting some yeses. We're getting quite a few yeses. Yes. And your places are all switching for some reason.
I know. That was fascinating. I was like, where did Heather go?
I don't know what's happening there. Yeah. So, I mean, this is familiar territory for most of us. Amy, why? Like, let's go to the self-control question, which you and I did 2 episodes on that, but it's probably been at least a year, maybe 2 years since we've had that conversation. So I know I've got a lot of new listeners. Like, self-control, as I grew up in church, meant only eating 2 cookies instead of 3, or, saying no to dessert when it wasn't a weekend or whatever. I mean, there was all kinds of crazy rules around that. But that's not really what biblical self-control is it, Amy?
No, it's interesting, actually, though. I think when I was young, if we heard the language of self-control in the church, there was a lot of things it was talking about, right? Self-control and how we manage ourselves and our relationships and how we spend our time, how we use our words, self-control. But now if you said self-control, right? If you said self-control, everyone would relate it to food. And most people would relate it to food.
Yeah.
And so you and I have had this conversation in terms of, just how funkity-dunkity-dunk it got when, like, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, in terms of church, there was a lot of crazy, crazy language as it related to, just honoring God with your body, but this is how you did it. And it would be like 600 calories a day or 800 calories a day. And I've shared on here, and my sweet mama, who's 87 and would want her testimony to bring glory to God and to help other women. Her sweet little, diaries would say, Lord, I just confess my lack of self-control. And it would be because she had crackers with her tuna, my lack of self-control. And I remember reading these when we were going through stuff as we were cleaning our phone, I just crying and thinking, my mom, the weight and shame that my mom felt around the fact that she was so hungry that she added some crackers to her tuna, right? Which is, let's just say tuna. Okay. I mean, it can't, I don't is anyone? Okay. Yes, exactly.
We got a sad face for tuna.
I know. Sad face for tuna, but sad face for my mom, right? Sad face for my mom to think her confession to the Lord. And the thing is, my mom's little Bible was worn out, but like she had read that thing and it was highlighted and underlined and pencil marked, and And my mom loves Jesus, loved the Lord. And the message she got, and all that little clunkety clunk of books was written by men that one was like a army doctor, one was like it was a psychologist, think yourself thin, pray yourself thin. And again, the message is, holy cow, if you're not thin, you're not honoring God. And so self-control means I have to control the flesh, which again, this is a whole doctrine language that gets all messy mess, in order to honor God. And that means whatever diet culture rules people are purporting at that time. So here's how crazy that is. If I'm to honor God in the 80s, it would have been, I'm not going to eat any fat, right? Oh, but now that would be like, no, of course you can get you an avocado, right? But if I'm not to honor God right now, I'm not going to have, just mouth it, everybody, carbs, right?
Carbohydrates.
If I'm to honor God, that's crazy. What that says is the church, but also the diet culture is using, right, moving targets to something, but the church is using the diet culture, $1 billion industry, to ping and go, oh, that is what we consider honoring God. What? That's so crazy, you guys. That's so crazy. No, right? We just got to say, let's just shake our heads. No way. No way. We got to, and the thing is, if we, this is all the time. This is the conversations I'm having here on this couch and in this office all the time. All church leaders, church, worship leaders, pastor, this precious worship pastor and his wife came and they just wanted to get healthy. And then I said, oh, darling, you've had an eating disorder, right? You've had this eating disorder for you. No, we went away on retreat. And one of the things we came to is we need to honor God with our health. And what they were saying was we need to get thinner, right? So they were so amazing and so receptive to what the truth of how, if the gospel's not good news, guys, it's not the gospel. And it is for all of us and every part of us. And Lord, teach us. We want to know. And so they were like, whoa. So they were like, so you're not going to give us a meal plan? At the end of the first session, there's like, just to be clear, is that okay? We just want to make sure. I was like, no, I'm not going to.
Well, and Presley used in the chat that we're monitoring for questions here. Presley used this language that I've heard in church too, that we have to discipline our flesh into submission. And you and I, we also did episodes that might have just been last year on the flesh. Will you just speak briefly to that concept?
Yeah. So what's so interesting is, if we're talking about disciplining the flesh, which there is a lot in scripture to talk about sanctification, and our sin is sin, right? Sin is sin. And we got to take sin seriously. We live in a culture that doesn't take sin seriously. And when we use God's name in vain in order to promote dieting, well, we got to take that seriously. We got to crucify the flesh. Right? When we use God's name in vain and say, that's, oh Lord, please we got to hold each other accountable. If we're talking about, crucifying the flesh, and then we've got to talk about where we're spending our time with our eyes. What are our eyes viewing? What are our ears hearing? What are we reading? Where is the right object of our desire? Is it the Lord? Is the Lord the object of our desire? Then if we're talking about crucifying the flesh, we're using that language to say, I would like to be a size 6 in my pants. And so if I crucify the flesh, then the Lord is going to bless this effort because I'm doing something biblical and spiritual. And now I'm honoring God by being in the smaller size. Wow, I've just gone on a labyrinth and I don't even know how to get out now, right? I'm like, where did I go? And the thing is, guys, we're cheering each other on in this. We're as Christians, we're like, and I have this, okay, I'm gonna try not to get like I get revved up. Any hearts? Can I guys see some
Bring
hearts?
it. Bring it, Amy. Bring it. We like the rev. We're good with the rev. You got lots of hearts for the rev and an applause.
Okay, good. I had a client this week who again said, I spent 20 years, who she didn't know she had anorexia until we met. And she said, I got 20 years of applause from the church for being sick, 20 years of admiration, 20 years in the church of saying, you look great. Wow. How do you do it? How do you do it with that many kids? And wow, you're so thin. And she's freer than she has ever been. And she is not the same size. Thank you, Lord. Her body's recovering and her body's healing. And she is free of the obsessive thoughts about food and body. She enjoys all foods. She takes care of her health. She's present with her children. Her children are growing in their understanding of just normal eating because they're now with a mom who's eating. And she is getting nothing, like zoop, like people who used to talk to her aren't talking to her. She said, I don't know anyone in the church, like nobody's here who understands this, because the only language is, well, the messaging feels like she must have let herself go. I wonder how her relationship with the Lord is, right? And not one person. I mean, I've asked this question several different ways because I thought this can't be true. I've seen pictures of what she looked like. Not one person in the church said, hey, are you okay? You've had 4 babies. You are a mom. Hey, and I never see you eat with us. Nobody said, are you okay? You know what? They were jealous of how thin she was. Jealous. Hey guys, we got to look at each other and go, hey, tell me more. Tell me more of yours. Tell me how you are. We're not paying attention. Oh, I'm going to cry. We're not loving each other well. You want to talk about crucifying the flesh? Right. Let it be our desire to look a certain way so that the world praises us instead of Jesus Christ. Right. That's the flesh we got to crucify.
Right. Let me just,
go ahead. No, you go.
I was going to repeat that for anyone who didn't hear it, that crucifying the flesh is really crucifying that desire for the applause and the glory that belongs to the Lord alone. And you know what? That's a whole lot harder than it is to go on a diet and lose 10 pounds. Right. I mean,
which is a repeated cycle.
Right.
Anyway.
Right. Because gain it back and then lose it again.
And so the enemy is the enemy because he keeps us distracted from the good things, the kingdom things. And here's the thing. This is why I don't retire. I want to hang up a shingle, but here's one of the reasons that I don't. Because if believers get this, we push back the darkness in a space that is invaded with darkness. We push back the darkness and we walk in the light. And guys, we have an opportunity to do this because we have a voice. All you have to do is be another woman, right? And men, I mean, but we get to say to each other, hey, you know what? I'm gonna share with you my experience. Or if somebody says, wow, something's different about you, I want to tell you what's different. I am crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I live in body, I now live by faith, right? It's like, oh Lord, yes. And guys, this is in bodies that come and go. I've got different pant sizes in my closet. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, what you want? I don't, okay, right? I have a weird knee, right? It's like, oh gosh, that knee is a bum knee. What's going on with that knee? Why am I limping when I stand up? It's like, oh, are we getting our period? Are we not getting our period? Is this menopause? Is it? I've never seen so many I've never seen so many perimenopause commercials. And I'm just like, man, all you had to do was search one question, guys. It's like, right? I mean, Lord, we can invade this space with the truth of the gospel.
Amen.
It's good news. It's good news.
Amen.
And sin is sin. And I confess it first. Let me be the first to confess, because the world is constantly telling us what to look like. Constantly. when you're 20, when you're 25, when you're 30, when you're 35, when you're 11, the sweet baby girl who is, oh my goodness, she was in here yesterday. She's now 16. She was 11 when she first started with her eating disorder because she got a phone and she started looked up Pinterest, and she said, I didn't know anything was wrong with my body till I was looking up a cookie recipe on Pinterest. And then there was the dancing banana. Remember the dancing banana that used to be everywhere telling you not to eat bananas? It was like, is there a banana on my screen? Right. And she said, I didn't know, and went into a full-blown eating disorder. She is walking in so much freedom. The world is telling us how to look and how to be and how to act. And we've got to be in the word to know how to look and how to be and how to act.
Yeah. Amen.
And thank goodness we don't all look the same. That would be weird. What if we were all on the screen looking the same? That'd be so weird.
Absolutely, it would be weird. It'd be hard to tell each other apart.
It'd be hard to tell each other apart.
But it makes me think, and I'm going to say this very gently, I hope. Gently might not be my spiritual gift. I'm working on growing in that. But, I always get the pushback on gluttony, and I've done episodes on that. You and I have talked about that. But I rarely get pushback on envy, right? But if you look at the sins on the New Testament lists, right? Envy is there. Gluttony is not on those lists, right? And so, like, to kind of loop back to what you're saying about like our role in the church, like we got to stop assuming things about women who wear the size we wish, quote unquote, wish we wore. But I also want to loop back though. You said something very poignant, and you said it to me when we were having a conversation earlier this week. So that's probably what stuck out to me. But how many of you heard Amy say just a couple of minutes ago about taking God's name in vain and all this? Did anyone catch that? Our studio audience, you guys heard that? Like, did that jolt anyone else? Like, were you like, wait, what? What does that mean? Yeah, Amy, can you fill that out, Amy? I know the illustration when you and I talked about it earlier was kind of this concept that I've seen on social media over and over again, this, pithy little things like, I'm stewarding my body well, so God's going to bless me for doing that. Like those kind of things. Can you just kind of briefly explain, how is that taking God's name in vain?
Yeah, boy, Lord, I mean, we could just sit together like in a dung pile, right? And just confess our sins. So I'll just say first, just my own sin first. We use God's name to sell products, plans, ideas, concepts, and we do that as a way of, and I think a lot of times it's not out of we've seen other people do it, so we're modeling what other people have done. I think we believe, some people really, really believe God's blessing me because I'm eating less or not eating this thing, and so when we use God's name to sell a product or to sell a plan, for one, it misrepresents the gospel. That's not the gospel. And when Peter, so that's in Acts, that's on the steps, right? And he says, he wants money. And he says, I don't have any money. And he says, look at me. He's going up the temple steps to go in for prayer. And he said, money, I don't have, but what I have, I give to you. Get up and walk. That's the gospel. That's the gospel. When we're using God's name to give something that God isn't in the business of giving, right? Then we're using his name in vain. We're taking God's name out of context. And it's scary to me. I mean, God cares about his people. He cares about his church. I mean, one of the times we see in scripture when Jesus gets riled up in a way that, man, I think Jesus is so patient, but he gets riled up when the money changers are in the temple, using God's space, using God, the holiness, the beauty of where God said, oh, this is supposed to be a house of prayer, right? I mean, if we were as passionate about prayer as we were about our perfect bodies, things would be different in this culture. Things would be different in our neighborhoods, right? If we were as passionate about prayer, if we were as passionate about the people that don't have food as we are about the excess that we have, that we're saying, I've got to resist and I need a plan to resist. If we were that passionate about the people that are going hungry, the kids that are on the school meal program, that don't have food, and we're like, I don't know, am I trying to be good today by not eating that? It's like, whoa, man, Lord, I just break my heart for the things that break yours, Lord. And if we think about that, taking God's name in vain, I can search my heart, Lord, where I'm doing that in any way that isn't honoring to you, that isn't really reveal the truth and the beauty of the gospel. When there are before and after pictures, and I know this is going out to a big audience, maybe, and I recognize that people make their living on before and after pictures, and I just want to say that I'm not. When we do that and we tag God's name on that before and after, what we're doing is we're putting up an idol. There's an idolization, and it's the objects of our desire. I'm going to read to you out of Psalm 63. God, you're my God. I eagerly seek you. I thirst for you. My body faints for you in a land that's dry and desolate and without water. So I gaze on you in the sanctuary to see your strength and your glory. My lips will glorify you because your faithful love is better than life. Let me say that again. Because your faithful love is better than life. So I will bless you as long as I live. At your name, I will lift up my hands. You satisfy me as with rich food. My mouth will praise you with joyful lips. When I think of you as I lie on my bed, I meditate on you during the night watches because you are my helper. All of that is, he is the object. I will meditate on you. My thoughts on my bed will be on you. If that was my before and after picture, right? I'm meditating on you. Oh, rejoice. You're my strength. You're my hope, right? Not this product, not this plan, and not my body that is 10 pounds lighter or right. I'm not, getting well and recovered and walking with freedom, walking an object of our desire is not, how you were talking about gluttony earlier. We actually are far less gluttonous when we spend time with Jesus, because it is he who satisfies us as though with rich foods, right? So when he is the object of my desire, those things all come back to the middle. And I get to love what he's created, food and being at the table and being in his presence. And so when people think, oh, if I didn't do this, I would eat everything. It's like, no, when you are meditating on his goodness and his glory in the night watches, you're not like, oh, I can't stop ruminating on a pizza. Now, again, I'm not saying, right, eating disorders, that's what I do for a living. And so, right, but what I'm saying is, we don't go, I'm going to abandon this, and that means I'm automatically going to be struggling with this. Oh, Lord, be the object of our desire. Be the object of our desire, rather than the desire be me, right? That it's not, I'm not the object of my desire. And that's what so much of this is. I'm the object of my desire.
Yeah. That's so good, Amy. And as I think about my own story with disordered eating and an eating disorder, when I was laying on my bed, I wasn't thinking about the goodness of God. I was thinking about how I could lose a couple more pounds to reach the next goal. Right. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but I just know, for me personally, from my story and the women I've worked with, it's really hard to make body change and the Lord equal objects of desire. For me, body change always ruled the day. It consumed me. And probably there's some physiological aspect to that, because I was hungry, right? And so my body was like, no, we're going to think about food because that's what you need. Yeah. So not to shame anyone who's done that, because I have done that. Like, I love how you always are like, I'm going to confess my sin first. And, yes, I don't talk about anything on this show that I'm not guilty of, but, we get so distracted from loving God and loving others, because culture tells us we need to love ourselves before we can do that well. And it's just a lie. Do we have any questions? I know a couple of you came in with questions, but we've gone to some great places today. Jonna, you had a question. Would you be willing to start us off with some questions today? Unmute.
Oh, I unmute.
Was
Oh,
I
there we
was
go.
looking in the wrong spot to unmute. I'm sorry. Yeah, I have about 9 million questions, but I won't try to hog the whole time. So I'm gonna give you my most disgusting question.
Oh,
Okay.
good. Oh, that's fun. Love
And
that
and
disclaimer.
just to well, and I was listening while I was shoveling my driveway this morning with for snow. I was listening to an old podcast with Tracy Brown where Heather, and I had no idea that this was related to dieting and stuff over the years. So it was I almost went into a little bit of a depression this morning. But
Mm.
so I struggle with, here's my question. I struggle with slow motility and digestive issues. And right after Thanksgiving, I had probably COVID. I had a really bad cold and stomach stuff. So since then, it seems like no matter what I eat right now, um, I'm fine during the day, but at night I start to get really full of gas and bloating. And my husband has had brain tumor surgery and he can't smell, but he can smell that. Um, and so I'm making his life very difficult.
Mm.
Um, and I'm sleeping, so I don't even know that it's happening, but he goes to sleep later than me. So, any suggestions about what I can do to get my, like diet culture would say, and even when I've gone to a functional medicine person, you need to go on a keto diet or you need to, do all these things, but doesn't sound like that's really the right answer. So anything I can be doing to fix this?
It's a long answer. It was not a disgusting question. And it's such an important issue. I deal with gut stuff with eating disorder recovery all the time. And so it is a big deal. And it's interesting that it was getting worse after, like you said, you had COVID. What I probably will do is not give you the long answer, but to tell you that there are some, if you were coming to see me, one of the things that we would do is we would sort of look at what you're eating right now, look at what's kind of triggering your gut, and we would do some meal hygiene. You're right. Eating disorder history, past, can cause slow motility. It can cause delayed gastric emptying, all those things which result often in gas. And it can get triggered again, like you're saying, by some different things. And that's not the same. You bring up a really good point because, people don't use the word dieting really anymore. Heather and I say diet culture, but it's really this obsession with wellness culture, people would probably say. And so even a lot of people who have a history of eating disorders, if they need to go to a functional medicine, it can be very triggering because there's a lot of elimination and a lot of some of those things. There's some really basic things. I don't probably want to just blurt them out on here because they can be very specific and I don't want anyone to get confused about their own situation. But we would do some meal hygiene checking. We would work on just pacing of your eating right now. We'd work on slowing down your chewing, right? Giving your body as much digestion up here as it. But then we would work on, do we need to use some supplementation that can help that right now? Increase motility. We would do some of those things in a way that still honors you eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full in a wide variety of foods. If we found that a food was really triggering, I want that you bring up a really sweet point here that taking care of our health and even working on recovery is not the same as diet culture, right? That's not the same as just quote unquote going on a diet. But I will tell you, what you said, I think is so important for anyone who has a history of eating disorder. A lot of times, doctors, even functional medicine doctors, sort of give out real blanket sort of diet recommendations or plans that can be very triggering. They can be very, very triggering for somebody who has it, and even somebody who does not have an eating disorder. Often, when they go and they're given sort of a blanket, do this, it can actually lead to some disordered eating, which I think is a really important point. But you and I can take the GI question offline because I think it's a good one. Yeah, it's a really good one.
Well, I think Karen has another question about digestion. Karen, you want to shoot Amy your question?
Okay, maybe this is along the same lines. just having come from a situation of just a lot of stress in my personal life, I realize I've had, like at night too, I'll just get like really bad indigestion, or it's just like very bad heartburn. And I don't know if they're like, I am very fearful to go see a doctor because I don't want to be weighed. I don't want to, I know that I can find a doctor that maybe won't want to do that, but I've just had a hard time getting the courage up because I have dealt with eating disorder in the past, and I'm very thankful to say that God has healed me and delivered me completely. Sorry. But yeah, it's an issue when, I'm waking up in the middle of the night, and I know that because of stress, I'm like having these like acid reflux things, and I'm not really eating a lot at night. I'm just trying to like, sleep through the night. So
yeah. So I would say that this is two things. I wish I could, I want to like take these little, this is when I'm just do this little hug and just do I do that one. Because these digestion issues matter to me so much, because it feels in some ways like a remnant, like you can't get, it's like, I'm well, I'm doing well. And then this thing is like, it's like the thorn in my flesh, from past and history. You hit something that's so important. Our stress affects it affects our digestion so much. It affects our digestion. Let me just hit on a couple things that you said. One, every one of you, I train my clients in this. Maybe Jean has an example where she could raise her hand and say, you do not have to be weighed when you go to the doctor. Okay. You can ask them to get 3 other measurements, heart rate, oxygen rate, if they want to, whatever, but just say, hey, it's triggering for me to get weighed, and either weigh blind, please don't show it, or I'm not going to weigh. They're working for you, right? You're not working for them, and they're working for the insurance company. You just get to say, oh, I don't want to be weighed. But what is interesting is I wish I could replicate a believing dietitian and there are out there that also understand GI stuff, because it is a big deal and it matters. And what gets tricky is if you have a history of an eating disorder, then it kind of gets in your head again. Right. But again, there's a lot of things. We can use ginger. We can, these are all things that you probably know, but we can kind of pace some of those things that helps with reflux. That helps with gut motility. We can use minerals and magnesium and salt and potassium to help with some of that regulation. We can use, there's a lot of different things that we can use that help with that are all amazing. And what we do is we have to take kind of case by case and say, let's help heal your gut where it is right now. But we don't have to do that by, as you said, Jonna, that I love that you said like, oh, here's a keto diet, right? And you're like, oh, my brain is like, wait, so I'm going to use disordered eating to heal my gut. I don't know which one to do, right? But there's a lot of things that we can do that are really just gentle, that it's like, okay, let's see if this helps. And both of the things that you guys mentioned are important and worth addressing. So I think maybe I'll have a call with both of you. Like how that's gonna work. One of the things I caution is to say just blanket recommendations on a Zoom. Sure. Is that it can be a little confusing for somebody who's like, is that me? And I never want to give kind of medical advice outside of in context of relationship. But
absolutely, yeah. Rachel, you had a question.
Wrong button. Sorry, wrong button. Amy, hi. I'm so glad to meet you. Here's your hug for me.
Oh, yay. Thank you.
Okay, so our church, I know, is about to start the whole fasting talk this Sunday. And every time, and I've heard, Heather's done a lot of awesome podcasts on fasting, but it's still just like big trigger word for me, because a lot of my disordered days were filled with how long I could go without eating, calling it intermittent fasting,
Yeah.
I haven't actually fasted since. I kind of have been in like a 2-year journey of recovery, and it makes me nervous to do it again because I don't feel like I'm in the right like heart space.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how to like navigate the conversations at church as they start talking. I'm not sure what he's going to be calling us to, if it's church wide, but I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I don't know my place and what to say as this starts on Sunday. So any advice is very good.
Yeah, yeah, that was a really fun podcast that Heather and I did on that because we talked, I think the podcast was even if you've had an eating disorder, should you fast,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And one of the things that we talked about in there is just how wide this is. So I think there's a place for corporate fasting. I'm going to say that just, I think, one of the things that makes me very sad is that so much there's corporate fasting in scripture, right? In Old Testament more than new, there's corporate fasting, and there is very specific things in the New Testament about really, right, doing it in private. And I think that it's so interesting because I think it's become sort of trendy to kind of start the year almost ironically when people are starting their diets, the church starts their fast, right? Oh, that's helpful. And I think it's so unhelpful. And I've had so many clients be like on Whole30, well, oh, that worked well because my church was fasting anyway. And the object of our desire, right, is the Lord. Let me just encourage you this. Let me say this blanket statement. I don't think you should fast. I'm going to give you that advice today, not from food. If you have a history of anorexia, especially if you have a history of restricting, fasting in that way immediately can get your mind twirling in ways it hasn't been in a long time. And even if it's unto the Lord, your body doesn't know it's unto the Lord. Your heart, soul, and mind know it's unto the Lord, but your body says, woohoo, right? Like, oh, this feels familiar. I don't know that the church as a whole understands that. I think, when they throw out blanket things like you can fast from, social media or that, it's like, great, but you still feel a little inferior than the people that are fasting lunch every Friday or every day and so I grieve a little in that because I think I know a lot of people who are hurting because of that and not knowing their place. Let me encourage you and say I think you're doing the right thing by saying, oh yeah, I don't think that's for me. And I've had to do that for myself too. Even me, years of history of recovery. And for me, I have to know how to protect my recovery in a way that I know my relationship with the Lord and the Lord's going to be, he's going to say, here's what I want to fast into his word. I want to be like, how can I be in his word, engaged in his word in a way that's different this month, maybe while the church is doing that. I think it's important for us to maybe have some of those conversations with our peers in the church to say, hey, I don't know if any of you else struggle with this, because you would be surprised how many people struggle, right? They also struggle with the shame around not being able to fast. And many of them struggle with obsession to keep going after the fast has ended. And so I think it's worth a continued conversation. I think I think you're on the right track. I think you're onto it. I wouldn't be afraid if the Lord leads you to have some of those conversations within your church, if you feel comfortable to. I think we need to, as believers, start saying some of those things like, hey, I wonder if we could do this differently. Maybe not from the pulpit. Could we do this in our small groups, or could we do this in a way that, you know what I mean? I think it can be really every year, again, January, here it is, right? It's like in my office is people feeling so much shame and just how do I handle this? And it's so triggering. I have one client who doesn't go to church all of January because of it. She doesn't go to church all of January, or she goes to a different church. That says something, right? And she couldn't love the Lord more. She's just like the most incredible believer. So it's not because she's, and I mean, I've heard people say, well, just don't do it or just get over it. Can we all just be like, yeah, it's not that easy.
Yeah. I mean, out of curiosity, our church just did a week of fasting and prayer. We do it with our staff. And so I'm a staff spouse, so we're invited to participate. And this is the first year that I really clearly felt like I could not participate at all, because I've tried it years past with accountability and some, frameworks in place. But usually by Wednesday, I'm like, ooh, I kind of like this empty stomach feeling. Ooh, I remember this. Ooh. And I know I'm headed for trouble. But I will say that I felt shame this time. I was like, oh,
Mm.
I guess it probably shouldn't be, I take a smoothie with me. I guess I probably shouldn't be drinking the smoothie in front of y'all. Hide this in my purse. So has anyone else, how many of y'all have just like show of hands? Has anyone else felt shame around it?
Mm.
Yeah. Couple hands going up. Yeah. And it's like, that's not the
Yeah.
heart behind it.
Yeah.
It's not what God's intention for fasting is.
Yeah. I
Yield
think
that.
so.
We have a question from Leslie.
Leslie.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Amy. So
Hi.
good to meet you. Thank you for all your wisdom and your heart. You have such a beautiful heart. I love hearing your wisdom. And my questions are pretty maybe black and white, but curious to know just like what is the percentage out there of women who have had or experienced disordered eating or eating disorders? I'm curious to know about that. That's one question I have.
Had or has. You have that statistic, Heather? I don't have it off the top of my head. It's women. It's like I could
Like
get it for you really
20% or
quick.
something like that.
Mm,
1 out of
so
5.
disordered eating is different.
yeah.
Eating disorders less than 20%. Might even be less than 10%. But women who have struggled with body hatred or dieting is like, well over 80%. Right.
Mhm.
So the statistics that are body hatred, dieting, etc., are much higher than what you would call an organic eating disorder, per se, diagnosable eating disorder. But women who struggle with body image or have dieted is like, upwards of like 90%. It's quite high. Mhm.
Yeah. And you would equate like any women who really diet, would you say like they have struggled with disordered eating in some fashion or?
Well, that's a good question. There's a spectrum. If we
Mhm.
put eating disorders over here, right, normal eating here, there's sort of a kind of this right spectrum that's right, dieting's in here, and then eating disorder or disordered eating is a little bit further over, and so we get all the way over into full-blown eating disorders. So it's an interesting question. I wouldn't say that everyone who has gone on a diet has struggled with disordered eating,
Mhm.
but I would say that everyone who struggles with disordered eating has dieted in some form or fashion because they have
Sure.
changed the way that they eat in
Yeah.
order to shape and form their body. I have people that have had to go on, a low sodium diet or, different, I'm a dietitian. So, right. It's like people who have high blood pressure or, diabetes have changed the way that they eat for maybe a medical diagnosis that people would say, well, is that dieting? And they're not necessarily struggling with disordered eating,
Right.
but those that struggle with disordered eating have done some form of, changing their food rules, times,
Mhm.
and so
Mhm.
have dieted in some form or fashion.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
My other question, I know Heather has described you as a non-diet dietitian, and my other question is about like the couple that came into your office who you had a meal plan. They felt led by the Lord to take charge of their health, and you were like, "Nope, I'm not giving you a meal plan." So are there scenarios where you have people in your office who have medical issues like heart disease or diabetes where then like it is appropriate to give them a meal plan, and how do you delicately do that, like if it is appropriate without
Yeah.
leading them down a road of
Yeah.
disordered
So
eating?
that couple, for instance, were eating, you know, going between eating what I would, very, let's say healthy, right? And then lots of fast food. And she was binging and purging. And so lots of, binging and et cetera, purging, also lots of purging. So if you could imagine what they thought was going to help them get healthy was a meal plan, right? So we went in the back door and started on their understanding of food and their body, and we worked on the shame We worked on the shame piece, and we worked on, and in doing this backdoor way of going, let's do the real, let's work on the real stuff, right? And listening to our body's hunger and fullness cues. And what does my body want to taste? Oh, it didn't really want to taste a Big Mac at noon. It actually wanted to taste a turkey sandwich and chips, and right. So in the end, we got where they thought they were going to get with a meal. Does that make sense? And the meal plan is the thing that makes them want to binge, right? I mean, it's like, so
Yeah.
the things that the question is, how do they had stuff that needed addressing for sure, right? Their relationship with food, their relationship with their body, how that related to their role in the church. They felt so much shame for being heavier than other people on staff, right? Those are the issues that we were addressing. And out of that, they came to this place of wellness. And absolutely, I mean, I have a client who, we're figuring out that she absolutely does have a gluten intolerance, and chances are she'd been undiagnosed celiac for a long time, and we're figuring that out based on diarrhea and all these different things. And I'm not like la 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 la. We don't, because we're talking about food, because food is, right, this beautiful thing that, and how does it help us, and how is our body responding? And so, one of the reasons I don't give a meal plan per se, and again, if somebody comes from me from higher level care with an eating disorder and they leave their treatment with a meal plan, I keep them on that meal plan initially. Absolutely. They are on that meal plan, and we are working that thing, and we are making sure that they are staying well, and slowly, we're listening to hunger and fullness cues, and we're making sure their weight's stable. And so absolutely, there is a time and place where those things are relevant. Most people want to be told what to eat and when to eat it. They want and think that then they'll get a magical body out of that. And so that's the meal plan I'm addressing when I'm saying, hey, I'm not somebody who gives out, hey, I always say I can give you 100 different ways to lose weight. That's not a problem. Right? That's, cut your calories by 1,000 a day. Good luck. See you back here in a week. Right? Don't eat anything brown. I always say that when I used to give talks. I would say, here's my new diet, done a bunch of research, asked some people, looked some things up, don't eat anything brown. And I would say to the audience, what's brown? And they would start naming things. And I say, don't eat any of those. Come back to me in a month. Do you think you'd lose weight? Yeah, you would. Because you know what? A lot of the food is brown. Right? So people think they want a dietitian to tell them, this is what you can eat, this is what you can't eat. And I say, let's listen to your body together and figure out what your body is asking you to eat. Let's listen to your family dynamics. What is it like to be a mom and make food, and how does that feel? Or, hey, can't even address food sometimes for a long time. We can't even address food because we got to address the things that are behind that, right? Because if we start talking about the food, it's like a rabbit that goes back in the hole. It's like, okay, let's not talk about food.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and just to jump on there, Amy, it feels like, the statement under everything you're saying is, especially for those of us with body image issues, right? It would kind of be nice if you could just write me a meal plan that would fix my body image issues, which is really what dieting is promised, right?
Yeah.
Like, here's your meal plan to fix your body image issues. Here's your meal plan to feel better and be an after picture and all of those things. But the truth is, what's beneath the surface of our body image issues, it's so much deeper, I would dare say, like spiritual, than just the way you eat. And we want to think about the way we eat. That's the easy thing to fix. Right? Yeah. It feels hard, but that's the easy thing to fix. But it's the harder work that's required to feel okay about the way we show up in this world.
Yeah, it's so true, Heather. And the if we go back to this precious couple whom I just love and adore and respect, they came after a retreat, right? A pastor's retreat. And one of the things they felt convicted about after meeting with is that we're not taking care of our health. And so we need you to help us take. And as it was so cool, because as what they thought they were coming in for was to address this idea of we're not taking quote unquote care of our health. And what they got was so much more than that. And it was true. Hey, we're not taking care of our health because you're in the diet culture. This is your, and the things. And it was what was really interesting was that as they continued to get well, there was a lot of pushback from their church, a lot of pushback in even the culture around that. It's really, really eye-opening.
Wow.
Mhm.
Well, we've got one last question as we wrap up here today. Came in anonymously, so my assistant Tara is going to read it.
Okay.
Alrighty, I'm going to read this for you. This is actually from Presley. She didn't mind me saying it was from her. So I'm going to just say here we've got, so the question is, I've struggled with binge eating as a result of comparison since I was a small child, using binge eating for comfort and to disassociate. And I wonder how you would advise Amy here to unlearn those patterns of behavior and go more toward intuitive eating.
Yeah, that's a lot. Oops, I've just dropped my ear. Just dropped my ears. Oh, I just am so tender towards that. It matters to me. And it's, I myself, struggled. I know you've all heard my testimony, but anorexia, but also, binging and purging and orthorexia, just covered them all. I just thought I'd cover them all before I got well. But it matters. And I think that's a really long answer, right? It's a long answer. But let's say that you were coming to me initially, and this was your history. We wouldn't necessarily just start with intuitive eating per se. We would start with what I would call a template. We would, sort of create a template in terms of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and make sure you had some snacks so that your mind and body knew that you were going to eat every few hours. And so we would practice the rhythm of that and holding that space for recognizing, is my body full? And I know I'm going to eat in a few hours again. Because and this is true for a lot of my eating disorders, we don't just jump into intuitive eating right away, because it's really confusing and disorienting. And it's like, oh, I'm never hungry. I'm not hungry till 5 o'clock. This intuitive eating thing's great. it's advocating for my restricting. This is working well. But the other is true. Somebody might say, well, I'm never full. And so we have to relearn those signals, those hunger and fullness signals. And so with binging, especially, we work on grounding, right? And we work on creating rhythm so that your body and mind anticipate what's coming in the best way possible. We work on variety. So there's foods that we love. We work on challenging some foods that maybe historically would have been scary. We would maybe even do that in session. Things that, I always binge on this food. We might practice that in session. We may take trigger foods out of the house for a while that are just too overwhelming. It's not like we would say to an alcoholic, here, have all this, alcohol right here in front of you. Sometimes we have to work on things sort of a little by little. But yeah, it's a really beautiful kind of process of relearning that. But I'm so glad you asked that question about intuitive eating, because recovery doesn't just happen by saying, I'm going to learn how to be an intuitive eater. And I think some people feel that like, oh, wow, I'm not doing well because I don't know how to intuitive eat. And it's like, oh, no. We'll just take our time, just learning to trust our bodies again and learning how to anticipate I'm going to get enough, and learning to add foods back in that I enjoy, learning to add foods back in that I thought I would never eat again. I didn't have a salad for a really long time. I was like, if somebody puts a salad in my face, I'm going to throw it back in their face. Like I would, and learning to eat those with other things. And so, yeah, it's kind of a fun, wild ride, but
I love it. Amy, thank you so much. I mean, I hear and all that recovery is worth it. So don't give up.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah. Well, would you all help me through either virtual applause or unmuting yourself? Just saying thank you to Amy for being with us today. Oh, you're getting lots of thumbs up.
Thank you, Amy.
Such a
Silent
blessing.
cheers.
So nice. Oh, this makes me so happy. Okay, I'm gonna always vote for a live audience now because this is so fun. And I always tell Heather, I'm like, we had a live audience, I'd get so riled up. I'd get so riled up because like when I know what I'm fighting for, I'm like, oh boy, I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Oh, this was so good. And thank you to our live audience. Thank you, ladies, for being brave, for bringing your questions, and just for being a part of what we're doing here. So thank you all. And thank you for listening or watching us on YouTube today. And I really hope something today has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye-bye.